tell us all about your new show?
Revolution. You know, the impulse was to really come up with just really an adventure show at the end of the day. Just a really rollicking, emotional, character-based saga, you know, kind of an epic quest about heroes and good and evil and loyalty and family, and it was just really kind of stripping down to sort of really the purity of really a Joseph Campbell type story, you know, like Star Wars. We call the amount of times I reference Star Wars or Lord of the Rings in an average day is pretty extreme. But you know, that story also goes back to Wizard of Oz, the Odyssey. I mean, it's that epic journey, and so it's that type of show with this very, very, you know, I think compelling and timely what if of what would happen if you did something as easy as just flip the lights out. And I think that's just something everyone can really relate to, because everyone knows the frustration of being in a 5-minute blackout, or if their computer freezes up, and if that happened forever, what that would mean. And we did the research of what it actually would mean. We looked at congressional reports and government think tanks and all sorts of research, and it turns out we're glamorizing it.
Oh, wow.
What would actually happen is so much hairier than what we're even depicting. That took my breath away. Another interesting factoid. The reason behind the blackout is not a solar flare or a magnetic storm, but scientists say that we're entering into an intense level of solar activity over the next 10 to 12 years, and there is, get this, a 10% chance of this happening.
Really?
Oh my gosh.
So there's some real basis for this.
Yeah, it turns out. I mean, the deeper I dug into it, it turns out that there is. But yeah, like, think about that. Like, 10% chance of something frying the grid that badly. So yeah, no, it's a really interesting what if, but it's just to show we in so many ways we want to be the anti-apocalypse show, and because it's about hope and it's about rebirth. I mean, there's a very specific reason I said it 15 years later, because I don't want it to be about death and destruction. I want it to be about heroes sort of restoring the land.
Is that why you start the story then? Like, you know, instead of staying with the actual blackout, you jump forward. Is that why you get past the whole?
Yeah, and we have, you know, we certainly have flashbacks in every episode, which are these sort of amazing kind of, I call them like epi shots of adrenaline, because it's harrowing. Because there really wouldn't be food and water, and society would fall. They're predicting within 5 days, and there is all that, but that stuff is. I didn't really want to make The Road, or I didn't want to make a show that was about death. I wanted to make a show that was about life, and that make this a world that actually people would want to live in, and that it's an interesting debate that a lot of things are worse, but a lot of things are better. And so that was why I said it 15 years later, so we could put sort of the purge, you know, in the backstory of the show, and it could influence your characters rather than having to live with it minute by minute, because that's look, it's exciting, but The Purge is not appointment television. It's a pretty depressing thing, and so for me, it's a show that is supposed to be fun and have really a lot of light and adventure to it.
Now, would my pal Bob Singer be involved in this?
Oh no! As much as I would love him to, he's busy with Supernatural. I mean, he's still
he's going to stay on that.
Full on, staying on, full executive producer of Supernatural. The minute I can get him, he'll be directing episodes for Revolution. But no, full time on Supernatural.
There are also a lot of mysteries set up in the first episode of the series, and how much are we going to find out throughout the season?
You know, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the endless mystery. I like to ask a bunch of questions and then answer them, and then have those answers expand to even bigger questions. So it's going to be that. I mean, I think there's going to be a solid narrative drive through the first season where you're really going to feel like we're moving the football forward, and that it isn't. We're not going to be coy or really hold off on things. We're going to move forward. We have the answers. We're going to give the answers, and then the answers keep making the problem worse and worse. But it's also, you know, I think what makes especially genre shows, you look at a show like Lost, for instance, which is like the gold standard of a show like this, and those are character dramas. Those are about the people. And people think the island is interesting, but you watch Lost for those people. And that's what I'm really focusing on here, which is this is about these characters and who they are and what we surprisingly reveal about them, and just about this family trying to reunite. And for me, that's just as important as turning the power back on.
In creating the series, how far out did you map story ideas?
You know, I'm a very anal individual, so I like to know answers and I like to have a plan. So at this point, at this very early stage in the game, I have like a rough shape of, 3 to 4 years, and with the ability of it to be able to go beyond that. I certainly know what the first season is going to be. But what's great about this show is it's a whole world. And even though the first season takes place in this country called the Monroe Republic, that's not to say that that's the only country in North America. And that there's whole other places to go and whole other horizons to explore. My last show, I was sort of infamous for having a 5-year plan, which was all well and good until we got to season 6. And I've really learned from that mistake, and I'm not going to make that mistake again. If knock on wood, we go that far.
Yeah, season 7.
Yeah, right, exactly. 5-year plans have their fallibility.
Will the drive be to try to turn the power back on, or will they kind of abandon that drive?
No, that's one of the main drives. I mean, there's multiple drives going on, and that's what makes it a great show, is that different characters are across purposes in terms of their motivations. Charlie wants to get her brother back. They want to turn the power back on, which is very complicated and difficult. More and more of these sort of resistance starts rising up against the militia. And so it's great because there's a lot of different storylines that we can play that are all very visceral. Not any one of them is complicated or confusing. It's about freedom, family, and restoring society. And it's just who can't relate to those issues.